Jedi, yeah, crown me king, tell them get it.
Shalom, and welcome to another edition here on the Genesis 49ers page, where we say no to vague interpretation and we give thorough breakdowns. Genesis 49ers, we back but never moving backwards, here to put Israel on the atlas. Y'all know the slogan. We say no to vague interpretations and give thorough breakdowns. We're back. I know it's been a minute, but we're back with a goodie. Today's topic is the canonicity of the Bible, learning the construction of modern canons. Now, why did I pick this topic? I picked this topic because a lot of people are confused and misconstrue the canonicity of the Bible, and they base it off of things that are not solid. For example, people will say, well, if it ain't in the King James Version, I'm not going to read it. The King James Version was not penned by Moses. The King James Version was not penned by Ezekiel, Isaiah. Stop treating it as if it was, because that's not the case. The King James Version followed a Protestant construct and model, which we're going to get into today. This is why certain books are not in the King James Version. This is why the translation itself is iffy in certain passages. And we know that for a fact. I did a video on here about the King James Version, the errors in the King James Version. You can check that video out on Genesis 49ers. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe. Also, click that notification bell so you can be notified when I release a new video. Share the video on the social medias, on your Facebooks, on your Twitters, so on and so forth, so we can get this information to the four corners of the earth, pursuant to Christ. Let's get back into the presentation, the canonicity of the Bible, learning the construction of the modern canons. Because again, like I said, there's confusion when it comes to this topic. What book to read, what book is valid, which one is authorized, which one should we research? Because most people say the King James Version. That's for the King James Version. And whatever, if it's 66 books, we need to follow that. And if you follow the Apocrypha in the King James Version, then you add the 15 extra books. But there are more books that were accepted. So we're going to go over the origin of the canonicity, the history of the canonicity of the Bible. So a few notes before we begin. The source I will be using today is the third edition of the Sefer, pages 9 through 14, in the section called the Preface. A few of the councils we're going to talk about today is the Council of Jamnia, 100 AD, Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, and Council of Laodicea, 363 to 364 AD, the Council of Trent, 1544 to 1562 AD is when that took part. That's the most recent one. So we're going to touch on all these councils. The first one, Council of Jamnia, involved the rabbis. The rest was all Christian-inspired councils. First slide says, you will also find references to books that you may not recognize if you are an adherent to the post-19th century Protestant Bible and its 66 books. Now, I want you guys to remember that. Be mindful of that. Post-19th century Protestant Bibles have, for the most part, 66 books. These citations include books such as the Jubilees, the Book of Enoch, Baruch, Ezra's, or the Maccabees. These books are called the Deuterocanon, Canon, or second books. Some of these books have been called the Apocrypha. Over the years, these books have been excluded from the 66 books of the Protestant Bible. However, this exclusion cannot be justified historically. Again, this is the point of the video, the canonicity of the Bible. The reason why your King James Version only has 66 books cannot be justified historically. And we're going to get into it. In the 2nd century BC, rabbis translated the 46 books from Hebrew to Greek, a translation called the Septuagint. The LXX, which is 70, which is the Septuagint, did not include Enoch and Jubilees. The LXX did not include the 3rd and 4th Maccabees because they were written in the period between 200 BC and 1 AD. I mean, it was after the other books were compiled. In the 1st century, the early believers relied on this Septuagint as their source for sacred scriptures, and the writings of the New Testament also indicate that there was a reliance on Enoch, Jubilees, and the 4th Ezra or 2nd Ezra. The first attempt to limit the books available to the believers happened at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. This council created 60 rules or canons. The 60th canon concluded that the books of the Old Testament, which were approved to be read, were Genesis of the world, the Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Esther, 1st and 2nd Kings, 3rd and 4th Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Ezra. And quick side note, 1st and 2nd Kings, 3rd and 4th Kings is Samuel's. It's including Samuel's. 1st and 2nd Kings would be Samuel's. 3rd and 4th would be what we know as in the King James Version as 1st and 2nd Kings. Just for the people that don't know that. But anyway, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Ezra's, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Job, the 12 prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Baruch. So interesting. Baruch was, according to the Council of Nicaea, in the canon, but today it's not in the canon. It's in the books known as the Apocrypha. Lamentations and the Epistle, which is the Epistle of Jeremiah. That was also in the canon, right? That was in the canon according to the Council of Nicaea. So we're already seeing a discrepancy in the canon that we have today, the 66 books. It says Lamentations in the Epistle, Ezekiel, and Daniel. 42 books are individually counted, and this list includes Baruch and the Epistle of Jeremiah. So you have 42 books in this one, right? In today's canon, you have at least 39 books, I believe. The council then concluded that the books of the New Testament which were approved to be read were the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Acts of the Apostles, 7 Catholic epistles, to wit, 1 of James, 2 of Peter, 3 of John, 1 of Jude, 14 epistles of Paul, 1 to the Romans, 2 to the Corinthians, 1 to the Galatians, 1 to the Ephesians, 1 to the Philippians, and 1 to the Colossians, 2 to the Thessalonians, 1 to the Hebrews, 2 to Timothy, 1 to Titus, and 1 to Philemon. 26 books were counted, and the book of Revelation was excluded. So they did not include the book of Revelation at the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. So, quick side note and sidebar on this. Anybody telling you that the Council of Nicaea is where they created the idea of Jesus or Christ, they're completely wrong. Tell them to list what canon that said that, because they made canons or rules during this council. Tell them to provide you evidence, because clearly it had nothing to do with the creation of Jesus Christ. It was the canonization of the Bible and the different rules of the church, and also the divinity of Christ. That's what was being discussed at the Council of Nicaea. Just a quick sidebar, because a lot of people run with that notion. I guess they're getting it from the zeitgeist. The first attempt at the canonized version of Scripture included 68 books, not 66. Both the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Laodicea adopted the existing Tanakh as the total text of the Old Testament in their rule. Although the order was obscured, around AD 100, Jewish rabbis met at the Council of Jamnia and decided to include only 39 books in the Jewish canon, because they were that could be found written in the original Hebrew. Recall that 3 centuries earlier, 70 rabbis translated 46 books from Hebrew to Greek. So there's already a discrepancy there between 100 AD and the time of the Septuagint. 46 books was in the Septuagint Old Testament. When the rabbis came to Jamnia, the Council of Jamnia, they made it 39 books. So now you're missing 7 books within this short period of time, about 300 years. The delineation of sacred scriptures by rule or canon began to emerge in the late 4th century and early 5th century with the work of St. Jerome, aka Eusebius. Jerome sought to limit the books of the Old Testament to the 39 books of the Tanakh. He was overruled, however, by Pope Damasus, who wanted all 46 traditionally accepted books included in the Old Testament. So the Latin Vulgate Old Testament was finalized with 46 books, not 39. The exact list of books of the New Testament in the number and order in which they are traditionally delivered was set forth by Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, in a letter of AD 367, and Pope Damasus later ratified the same list. In AD 1536, Martin Luther translated the Bible from Hebrew and Greek to German. He limited the Old Testament to only 39 books, and an appendix he called the Apocrypha. He also removed the books of Hebrews, James, Jude, and Revelation from the New Testament order, declaring them to be less than canonical. Now, quick history on Martin Luther. Martin Luther believed in the faith-only doctrine. Well, many of you Christian church leaders and goers, you push this doctrine where you just need faith only. So in order for him to push this, and only grace, right? I think it's sola gratiis is the name of the doctrine in Latin. So in order to push this doctrine, you have to get rid of books like Hebrews. You got to get rid of books like James. Because James, the famous scripture, faith without works is dead. So you got to have works. You got to have commandments. You got to be righteous. You can't just say you believe. You have to put forth works. The book of Jude, the same way. Revelation tells you these are they that keep the faith of Christ. Keep the commandments of God and the faith of Christ. So he had to remove these books to push his doctrine. So a lot of times books were removed for certain biases that different church leaders and priests had at that time. And during Martin Luther's time, he hated anything that alluded to keeping the commandments in the New Testament. So he removed these books. So you see, and then that model of having 39 books in the New Testament, he brought that back. He brought it back. Martin Luther brought that back. So if you're following that, you're following a Lutheran style or model. Carrying on. In AD 1546, the Catholic Council of Trent reaffirmed the canonicity of all 46 books originally found in the Septuagint, and reaffirmed the full of the list of 27 books in the New Testament as traditionally accepted. This canon is the last official canon of the Church. The 1560 Geneva Bible and the 1611 King James Bible carried a 39-book Old Testament, a 15-book Apocrypha, and 27-book New Testament. So everybody's saying 1611. The 1611 is inferior because it doesn't have the 46 books of the Old Testament. It just has 39. From something that preceded it almost 1,000 years. The Septuagint precedes the King James Version about almost 1,000 years, and it had 46 books. King James Version had 39 books because it was following that Protestant model that I was bringing forth. The 15-book Apocrypha and the 27-book New Testament, meaning it includes the book of Revelation, thanks to the Council of Trent. The publication of only 66 books actually became an editor's option when publishers learned they could sell as many Bibles with only 66 books as they could with a Bible that included an Apocrypha. So they start taking the Apocryphas out of Bibles more so for economic purposes, because it was like, look, it costs more money and resources to print the text with, 10 or 15 extra books. So 81 books. It's easy. We're gonna sell the same amount of copies and make the same amount of money without as much money put into the production of the books if we just leave 66 books and cut the Apocrypha out. So it was a money move. It was a business move. That's why, and it follow up to this day. Most Bibles, that if you go to a Bible, you go to a Mardell, you go to a Bible outlet, or you order one on Amazon, a regular Bible, it's going to be 66 books. That practice kept going. Back then they did it because they wanted to cut production costs. Today they're just doing it because they're just following tradition. So don't let anybody say, oh, King James supreme over. No, it's not. It's not at all. It doesn't have all the books, and you have a lot of erroneous translations found within the King James Version. And that's just facts. I already covered that in another video here on Genesis 49ers. By the way, subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Hit that notification bell so you can be notified when I release new content here on Genesis 49ers. Moving on. For many reasons, this method of inclusion and by default exclusion has relegated significant books to the dustbin. For instance, the justification for the elimination of the Maccabees is not set forth in the decisions of the councils. The argument that the Maccabees are merely historical ignored the extent that these writings answer many of the obscure prophecies found in Daniel 11, because Daniel 11 does talk about the Grecian Empire and the fall and all that, all of those things that pertains to the Maccabees. All right, the canon of Trent. So if you don't have the Maccabees and your canon, you are missing a huge chunk and a huge piece to the puzzle. You're not gonna understand anything. You're not gonna understand the Pharisees. You're not gonna understand the setting that the New Testament was in. You're not gonna understand neither Jew or Greek. You have to read Maccabees to understand why Paul said neither Jew or Greek. Because there was a period of time of Hellenization of Jews where they were forced to denounce being a Jew, to denounce their history and accept Greek culture and call themselves Greeks. That's why Paul said, there's no difference between a Jew and a Greek. Y'all are the same people. It's just that his forefathers were Hellenized and passed down to his children passed down, it continued as a lineage of Hellenized Jews going around calling themselves Greeks. So Paul's like, no, y'all both the same people, because he knew the history of the Maccabees. It's like today, the majority of our people are Hellenized. We're the Israelites. We teach we're the Israelites. We spread that through the four corners of the earth, but our people believe there's something else. Same thing that was going on back then. They believed they were Greeks. They believed they were Romans. They believed all type of things, right? Today, the same thing. We believe we're Spaniards. We believe we're Africans. We believe we're everything except the Israelite nation. So, continuing on, the Canon of Trent excluded 3rd Maccabees and 4th Maccabees, 2nd Baruch and 3rd and 4th Ezra, and Enoch and Jubilees were excluded from the Vulgate and therefore excluded from all Protestant Bibles. These books appear as a deuterocanonical works in various parts of the Christian world. However, for instance, both Enoch and Jubilees appear in the Abyssinian sect as a deuterocanonical works. Quick disclaimer. I'm not pushing or advocating the Book of Enoch at all. I don't think there's enough evidence found in the Qumran caves, aka the Dead Sea Scrolls. We find them in parchments. We probably have like 6 or 7 lines. So how do you take 6 or 7 lines and verify a whole book? I will never know. So Genesis 49 is not advocating the Book of Enoch at all. Now, I will advocate for the Book of Jubilees, minus any fallen angel translation, because again, like I've said before on this channel, I don't believe that angels can fall. They're powerful creatures. They're not going to fall. But that's for another lesson. That's for another day. Let's continue on. The decision to include both of these books was made easier when Paleo-Hebrew versions of Enoch and Jubilees was found in Cave 4 at Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls. In fact, the credibility of these two books given to find is much greater than the writings of the New Testament, where not a single original exists. The Enoch writings, in addition to many other writings that were excluded from the Bible, such as Tobit, Ezra, Baruch, and other books included herein, were widely recognized by many of the early church fathers as apocryphal writings. The term apocrypha is derived from the Greek word meaning hidden or secret. Originally, the meaning of the term may have been complimentary, and that the term was applied to sacred books whose contents were too exalted to be made available to the general public. So they felt like, oh, the prophecies in these books are too great for the understanding of the layman, pretty much. We can't give this to the laity. Gradually, the term apocrypha, books reserved only unto the wise among the people, took on a pejorative connotation. I mean, pejorative mean like a negative connotation, as the orthodoxy of these hidden books was sometimes questioned. Like today, when we mention the Apocrypha, oh, the Apocrypha is not a part of the books. We only need the 66 books. We only need the King James Version. We don't need the Apocrypha. We don't need that. It's heresy because it was found in Greek. That's some of the arguments you hear from, especially Christian apologists. When you hear them say that, it's from a place of ignorance, because first of all, the language of the scriptures should not be an arguing point to validate it. That should not be your only argument point. Secondly, they have found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Apocryphas written not only in Hebrew, Aramaic, and also Greek. So how are you going to make that argument now? There's no way. So Origen says in his commentary on Matthew 10 and 18, he says, distinguish between books that were to be read in public worship and apocryphal books, because these secret books were often preserved for use within the esoteric circles of the elite believers. Many of the unenlightened church fathers found themselves outside the realm of understanding and therefore came to apply the term apocryphal to what they claimed to be heretical works and therefore forbidden to be read. So these church fathers cannot understand these scriptures, cannot understand these books, and since they had a personal bias and difficulty with these books, they decided it was forbidden to be read. That's why the scriptures say, real quick, the scriptures say, do not make yourself an underling to a fool, because they do stuff like that. But let's continue on the presentation. It says, in the Protestant world, the Apocrypha designated 15 works, all but one of which were Jewish in origin and mostly found in the Septuagint, that is the Greek translation of the Hebrew. Real quick, remember, the argument for the Apocrypha, modern Christian apologists is, oh, it was found in Greek. But wait a minute, the Septuagint is completely in Greek, and it's one of the oldest translations that we have of the Bible. But what was it translated from? The Hebrew. So you can't run with that flaky argument. Continuing on, it says, and Aramaic text by the 70. There is a claim that parts of 2nd Ezra are Christian or Latin in origin, and that the 4th Maccabees was post-dated, although some of them were composed in the Levant and Aramaic or Hebrew. They were not accepted into the Jewish canon or Tanakh, formed in the 2nd century AD. Now, the Jewish canon or Tanakh was made in the 2nd century AD. The Septuagint was translated around the 3rd century BC during the Ptolemaic Empire. Which one has most credence? I'm going to go with the Septuagint, recorded well over 500 years before you had these morons come in the 2nd century AD. The source for that is Canonicity 67, 31 through 35. The reformers influenced by Jewish canon did not consider these books on par with the rest of the scriptures. Thus, the custom arose of making the Apocrypha as a separate section in the Protestant Bible, or sometimes even omitting them entirely. Canonicity 67, 44 to 46. The Catholic view expressed as a doctrine of faith at the Council of Trent is that 12 of these 15 works are canonical scriptures, and this is why when you get a Catholic Bible, they still include the Apocrypha within the original text and within the original list of books. It's not in a separate area called the Apocrypha. It's actually within the Old Testament. So you'll see the regular 12 prophets, and you will see Tobit. You will see the addition of Esther. You will see these books. They call the Deuterocanonical books, Canonicity 67, 21, 42, and 43. Many of the books were excluded due to the discrepancies with the formulation of the Talmudic calendar, a calendar which established the new year in the fall rather than in the spring as required in the Torah. Again, these people were removing books because of their personal biasness. Since some of these people subscribe to the Talmudic calendar, which says that the new year is in the fall, it has nothing to do with the Bible, they said, let's get rid of these books that contradict that. Personal biasness. Has nothing to do with keeping the commandments. They just want to push their doctrine. This is why your King James Version and your Protestant Bibles are limited. This is why. This is why you need to know the history. But Genesis 49ers, we're here for the people. We got your back. We did the research for you. It says, further, the Council of Trent did not have the benefit of the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they had an incomplete criterion. They didn't have the criteria. They did not have the field work at that time available to them to verify and give the veracity of these books like we do today. So today we have no excuse. We know what can be validated. We know what we can use and what we don't have to use. Why? Because we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a very powerful finding, right? So a lot of these books that I don't want to look at, they're found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The books of the Protestant Apocrypha that are not accepted by Catholics are 3rd and 4th Ezra, the Prayer of Manasseh, and 3rd and 4th Maccabees. The Protestant Apocrypha excludes also Enoch, Jubilees, and Jasher. Again, I do not advocate for Enoch, and I don't advocate for Jasher because Jasher is a plagiarized version of an earlier work known as the Yasipon. Maybe in the future we will break that down in a video about the Yasipon. And Lord willing, I can get my hold on the Yasipon. But the Yasipon has the information about Esau being going to the island of the Greeks and all of that history. So that's where Jasher was getting that from. It's plagiarized. Jasher came around the 15th or 16th century, I believe. So that can't really be verified. And the reason why I don't follow Enoch is because we only have like 7 lines found in the Qumran caves and the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's not, how do you verify a whole book out of 7 lines? I do not know. But Jubilees, we have enough parchments and enough scrolls to verify the legitimacy of Jubilees. The theme of Enoch dealing with the nature and deeds of fallen angels so infuriated the later church fathers that one, Felicius, actually condemned it openly as heresy. And I share that same sentiment. I don't believe angels can fall. They're too powerful. How do they fall? How do they fall? You're saying that there's evil angels in the scriptures and they're commissioned by the Most High. They don't fall. They are given orders and they do it. They're not like humans. So this church leader, he was against it for that reason. It says, nor did the rabbis deign to give credence to the book's teaching about angels. Rabbi Shimon ben Jokai in the 2nd century AD pronounced a curse upon those who believed it. That's a little extreme, but it says, so the book was denounced, banned, cursed, burned, and destroyed, and last but not least, lost and conveniently forgotten for 1,000 years. But with an uncanny persistence, Enoch found its way back into circulation 2 centuries ago. Fragments of 10 Enoch manuscripts were also found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The famous scrolls actually comprise only one part of the total findings at Qumran. Much of the rest was Enoch literature, copies of the Book of Enoch, and other apocryphal works in the Enochian tradition, such as the Book of Jubilees. In addition, there are references in this text from the Book of Jubilees, also known as the Little Genesis. It is an ancient Jewish religious work. Until the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the only surviving manuscripts of Jubilees were 4 complete Ge'ez texts, and the Ge'ez is the language of the Ethiopians, dating to the 15 and 16, well, the language of the texts of the Ethiopians of the Ethiopic Church, dating to the 15th and 16th centuries, and several fragmentary quotations in Greek, mainly found in a work by Ephanius, but also found in others by Justin Martyr, Origen, Diodorus of Tarsus, Isidore of Alexandria, Isidore of Seville, Eutychus of Alexandria, Canon, Malalas, George of Syncelus, George Cadrenos. There's also a preserved fragment of a Latin translation of the Greek that contains about a quarter of the whole work. It is considered canonical in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, where it is known as the Book of Division. The Ethiopic texts, now numbering 27, are the primary basis for translation into English. Passages in the text of the Book of Jubilees that are directly parallel to the verses in Genesis do not directly reproduce either of the 2 surviving manuscript traditions. So that's for all you brothers that, oh, the Ethiopic text. No, go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's how you get your veracity. Because It just said it. It does not reproduce either of the two surviving manuscript traditions. A further fragment in Syriac in the British Museum titled Names of the Women of the Patriarchs according to the Hebrew books called Jubilees suggests that there once existed a Syriac translation. How much is missing can be guessed from the stichometry of Nicephorus, where 4,300 stichoi or lines are attributed to Jubilees. Between 1947 and 1956, approximately 15 Jubilee scrolls were found in 5 caves at Qumran, all written in Hebrew. Large quantity of these manuscripts, more than for any biblical books except Psalms, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Exodus, and Genesis in descending order. So you had more manuscripts of Jubilees than majority of the books in the Bible that we have today, excluding Psalms, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Exodus, and Genesis. That means it was a very important work in the days of Qumran, at the community of Qumran. It indicates that Jubilees was formed by James Venicum, found that the Ethiopic was in most respects an accurate and literalistic translation.